I'm okay-ish.
That's not how you answered because you immediately started laughing when I asked.
Yeah. Oh, dear. I have another package lost.
Are you kidding me? We're not going back to that auction site.
I have another package that's lost. Okay, so I don't remember exactly where I caught everybody up to last time, so I will probably be repeating a little bit of information. I ordered a thing that I wanted to have for my microphone that helps with the noise levels and the signal coming out of the microphone, okay?
Right.
A little inline signal booster, basically.
And here I'm playing the role of everyone. I'm making the noises that indicate you're being listened to.
Excellent. Thank you. That package got lost by UPS.
Right.
Okay. Supposedly that package made it as far as my local UPS center, right? Mm-hmm. From which they distribute it to the various trucks and send it out to be delivered. I waited a day or two to see if that was going to be put on a truck to be delivered. And when it wasn't, I went to UPS and I said, hey, where'd it go? Nobody could find it, et cetera, right?
Right.
So then I got a hold of the company that sent it, B&H. Mm-hmm. And they immediately said, yep, it looks lost. We will send you a new one. Great.
Right.
Thank you so much. Very nice of you. Then, all of a sudden, on Thursday, I think it was Thursday. Yeah, Thursday, after we recorded last time, I think. The UPS website sent me a notification saying you have a package coming. And I thought to myself, interesting, because the replacement was not sent by UPS. It was sent by FedEx. Mm-hmm. So I look, and sure enough, they found my package.
Okay.
The original. It was in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
Which is a main UPS hub. Keep in mind, it had already been through Louisville, Kentucky at least once, according to the original tracking.
Right.
Okay? But no, it was still in Louisville, and they were sending it on. So I don't know how things get checked in here and yet stay in Louisville. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how that works. So they sent it on, and now I'm thinking, okay, great. I've got a replacement coming from B&H, and I've got the original coming from UPS. Clearly, at some point, I'm going to have to get a hold of B&H and see what they want me to do with the replacement, basically.
Right.
Okay? Well, at least one of them, because, I haven't paid for one that is now coming. The thing of it is, okay, they said it'll be here Friday. I said, okay, awesome, great. It'll be here Friday. Hoorah. Mm-hmm. It wasn't here Friday.
Of course not.
Neither was the replacement, which was also supposed to be here Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Neither was another item I've ordered, which was sent by a completely different third company called OnTrack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So
you've been ordering a lot of stuff, sir.
I know. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? As is customary, I gave them an extra day before I started calling. The original UPS package arrived Saturday. No, arrived Saturday, okay?
Okay.
On its heels arrived the replacement. Mm-hmm. So, as previously discussed, you cannot get a hold of B&H on either Friday afternoon or most of Saturday.
Right, during the Shabbat.
Yes. So I don't have a resolution on that yet.
Right.
Meanwhile, the other package I ordered from Amazon and being shipped by OnTrack has been in Seattle supposedly for 4 days now.
Well, that's nice.
Is
it doing like the touristy thing?
I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's visiting the Space Needle. I have no idea. So yesterday I called OnTrack and I said, I'm just curious as to why my package has been sitting in Seattle for 2 days at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And has not been delivered to me.
Right.
And I was told there's a problem with the weather.
There's a problem with the weather?
Now, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know that Seattle has been snowed in or fogged in or rained in, and certainly not for 2 days straight going into 3 days. I mean, I literally could have gotten in my car, driven to Seattle, picked it up, and been back in less than a day.
Right.
I wouldn't have been happy about it, but that is something I could have done.
Mm-hmm.
So it is sitting up in Seattle doing nothing as far as I can tell. And the gal I spoke with on the phone assured me it would be here Monday.
Now, that's interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, Monday is a national holiday, is it not?
It is a federal holiday,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes. And I specifically said, are you sure it's going to be here Monday? You guys are working on Monday? And she said, yes, of course we are. Okay, we'll see what happens.
That reminds me, I have 2 packages coming to my post office box at the UPS store tomorrow. And now I'm curious whether they will actually be delivered or not. Because,
See, I looked. I went through and I looked, and UPS does not take Martin Luther King Day off.
okay.
Neither does OnTrack, neither does FedEx.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. But you actually have 3 packages coming.
What?
You have 3 packages coming.
How is that possible?
One of them should be there Tuesday. How is that possible? Well, because I understand there's an annual celebration of the fact that you did not die the previous year.
Yes, I have survived another 300 well, at this point. Actually, yes. I don't know. At this, God knows what the math actually is, because we are recording 4 days after 2 weeks before the release of this episode.
Right.
If I'm correct, because...
You are correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got it so far. You've got it. At this moment, you are still alive.
Right.
And the thing is...
Which is actually 4 days before the anniversary of my entry into this world, naked and screaming.
And probably screaming about players that you didn't even have yet.
Right.
I
knew even then.
Yes, even then. So, on this particular occasion, I have elected to send you a little something because what I enjoy is a challenge. And that challenge is, can I, who has had at least 4 packages lost in the course of the last month, get something to you, who has also had packages lost over the course of the last month?
Well, the course of the last month, wait a minute, my package dilemmas started a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what finally prompted me to just get a box at the UPS store, because I actually figured out that the weakness in the delivery system was the person whose job it was to actually bring stuff to my door.
Okay, so here's the thing. I didn't realize you had a UPS post office box.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So I sent it to your physical address.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Tuesday. Yeah.
It'll be fine. What could go wrong?
Yeah. What could possibly happen? So when I have a tracking number, I will share that tracking number with you so we can both watch it wander aimlessly around the continent.
It'll end up at my parents' house in New York.
Yeah. I think you'll enjoy it. It'll be handy. I've enjoyed my copy for quite some time.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. There you go. That's your only hint.
I'm not going to guess now, because I frequently get in trouble for guessing.
Yes.
I'm very good at guessing gifts on limited clues. And Tiny she gets very angry about that.
Oh, dear, oh, dear.
You know, she'll say something like, oh, on Amazon, I ordered you something the other day. It'll be here tomorrow. And I'll be like, oh, it's that book. And then she hits me and cancels the order.
Oh, and cancels the order. How nice.
It's like, yeah, it's a book I mentioned 6 months ago that she suddenly decided to buy for me, and I'll guess that right off the bat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, this is a book, I'll give you that much, and it is something I have mentioned to you a couple of times before.
Oh, dear.
but in such a minor and obscure and far distant way that I doubt you'll even be able to remember it.
Speaking of books.
Yes?
So we are not recording on our normal day.
No, right? We are not.
And I am desperately trying to start a new D&D campaign. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to get my write-up finished because I can't do things simple. And right. I promise this relates into books.
Okay.
And I can't do things simple, so I just say, well, since I'm starting a new campaign, I might as well write my own custom backgrounds.
Sure.
Which sounds like a fun idea until you actually have to, put pen to paper or whatever it is
yes.
and write them out. And I'm like, well, if I'm writing custom backgrounds anyway, I might as well revise the entire equipment system of D&D.
You have the same problem my father has, which is no matter how small the project starts, mm-hmm. it quickly expands to fill all available time and resources.
The only saving grace is that starting a new campaign has a deadline. Like, mm-hmm. Our first game is going to be, I gotta look at my calendar here, Tuesday the 23rd.
Okay.
Which means whatever I'm doing really has to be done pretty much by tomorrow night so that people have a week to make characters and I have a week to actually, write an adventure in this world that I have developed.
Sure.
So anyway, I was actually just working on that when the clock hit 2:30 and it was time for me to get online and talk to you. Right. And I was struggling with the Dungeon Master's Guide because I was trying to find a specific table in there. The D&D 5th Edition Dungeon Master's Guide. And I don't want to badmouth this game again because, of course, we always have to put out that disclaimer that I like playing this game, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Have you ever read Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut?
I believe I have, but I also believe it was so long ago, like high school long ago, that I don't remember much about it.
Yeah, one of my English professors got me into Kurt Vonnegut, or English teachers back in high school. He told me I'd like it, and he turned me on to Sirens of Titan, which is probably my favorite book of his. And of course, for college, what was it, like 11th grade or 12th grade English class, Slaughterhouse 5 was de rigueur. We had to read that one. And then I read Cat's Cradle, and I've tried to read a few other Kurt Vonnegut things, but I found that those three were like, I just lucked out and picked the three that I would like of all his stuff, because I couldn't get into most of his other stuff. But
sure, that's understandable.
Cat's Cradle is a great book, though. It's basically about this crazy religion that is started by a reggae singer or a calypso singer. Mm-hmm. And the end of the world, which is destroyed by a wacky scientist who invents a new way for water to freeze, and then the whole world freezes. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah. It's starting to sound familiar.
Yeah, but I started thinking about it because there's a scene where the main character, whose name I can't remember, he's on an airplane flying to basically this little banana republic in the middle of nowhere, right? Which is where most of the second act of the story takes place. And on the plane, he meets a United States ambassador who is actually being punished because by being named the ambassador to this little banana republic because it's like a nothing country. Because his wife has, she had leftist friends, and it was McCarthyism, right? Mm. But he's talking about his wife. And there's this scene where he reveals that his wife's job is she's a professional indexer. Okay? And she is a master of indexing. And she tells the main character, who is a journalist and author, that he should never ever index his own books. Because a really, really good professional indexer can read everything about a character from their, or about an author from their index. And just as this, like, aside, as she's going through the whole process of how indexing is like a master art, right? And she finally drops a bombshell that this character whose book they had been reading, he is gay, and she can tell that from his index. right? Which utterly ridiculous, silly thing.
Okay.
But there you go. But it's all about the power of the index and how great indexing is. And you'll laugh it off. It seems like a joke because indexing seems like a nothing thing. Let me tell you something.
Right.
Trying to find absolutely anything in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition has turned me into a convert into believing that there is an art and power to indexing. And that good indexing is a masterful art that Wizards of the Coast does not have. Okay? There is a table that I was looking for in this book of basically starting equipment and character wealth by level. Mm-hmm. Which, like, if you go online and search for it, most people don't even think this thing is in the book.
Right.
But I have seen it. I know it is there.
Okay.
But everything I could think of to look up in the index, which might lead me to this table, it's not even words in the index. You know, there is not even an entry in the index for, like, character creation or PC creation or creating a character. Okay, none of these things are listed, even though there are extensive rules and options in this book for how the GM can change character creation. There is nothing for wealth. It is not anywhere near the treasure chapter or the treasure tables, and I am still searching for it. Now, I don't have time to keep searching for it, so I'm just gonna have to, come up with my own wealth standard at this point. But I know it's in there. And if there's anybody out there listening to this right now who knows where this table is in the D&D 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, in 2 weeks when you listen to this episode, as a birthday present, can you leave me feedback with the page number? I'm really desperate. In the meanwhile, I did actually start reading a book that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
Out of the blue. I finally started reading Rendezvous with Rama.
Ah.
Yeah. And, I brought it up. I can't even remember how long ago I brought it up. I brought it up on one of these episodes as a book I wanted to read, which is how Tiny learned that I wanted to read it and decided to get it for me for Christmas.
Right. So,
and I had mentioned it because I had actually been watching... I didn't even know the book existed, to be totally honest. I'm not a huge Arthur C. Clarke fan. I'm more of a Carl Sagan fan. You know, he's my hard sci-fi guy. But I had been watching this YouTube series by this guy, I guess he's Ross. And it's called Ross's Gaming Dungeon. And it's these very amusing reviews and sort of walkthroughs of obscure video games that people had either never heard of or forgotten about. Though to date he has reviewed 2 things that I personally have played. So I don't know how obscure he actually is. But one of the games he reviewed was an FMV game that came out in the 90s called Rendezvous with Rama.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was based on... Actually, it was based on the sequel to the book, Rendezvous with Rama. It's based on Rama 2. Rama 2, The Return of Rama, Electric Boogaloo, whatever it is.
You don't read beyond the first.
Yeah, you had said that. And I might check out the second one just for the tie-in to this game. But... the weird thing is, as he explains in this series, that even though the game is based on the second book, it's actually treated as if it's the first book. So in the first book, Rendezvous with Rama, just so that we're covering all our bases here, a spacecraft comes hurtling through our solar system of unknown origin, and a group of astronauts who happen to be in space go out to meet it. I think they're like a refueling ship or something, and they go out to meet it.
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
So they go out to meet it and see what the hell it is. And they're basically... because the ship is moving so fast through the solar system and it's going to be in and out and it doesn't seem to be changing course or anything, they just have to send whatever astronauts they can send to it, and they go in and they explore it and they check it out. And the thing is huge. And if you've ever seen Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, the giant cylindrical probe that comes to Earth, that whale probe that comes looking for the whales, it was actually a prop that was made for a Rama movie that never got made.
Right.
So, but anyway, and then in the sequel, the spacecraft comes back, and this time they have enough advance warning that they can assemble a crew of experts to go explore it. And the video game is actually based on the idea of that crew of experts being sent to Rama, except that it's the first encounter with Rama. But it's based on the characters from the second book.
Okay.
Yeah, weirdly enough. And otherwise, it's like your standard Myst clone point-and-click adventure game with all the crappy, badly interlaced video. That's all stuck into a postage stamp size. Like, every time someone's talking to you, they're always talking to you on a video screen or from far away or through a little window in the environment so that the actual videos aren't that big. Because, video compression.
Right.
Anyway, so I have been reading the first Rendezvous with Rama, and it's very good, but I find books that take place in the future that were written in the past are always amusing.
Oh, yes.
One of my favorite bits in this, because I think it takes place in like the year 2150 or somewhere around there. It's like 150 years from now. Or something like that. But the book was written in 74?
I think that's correct, yes.
And so there's like some things that immediately, like, they jump out at me. Like, one of the things was that two scientists who were talking about the mission and whether it was even worth sending an exploratory mission to this probe before it vanished completely. And they were arguing, and they had previous arguments. So they were voting against each other just to vote against each other in like the International Space Council. And their argument was because they disagreed as to whether the Big Bang model of the universe, the formation of the universe, or the stable state hypothesis was going to one day be proven to be correct. And those are the stable state hypothesis. I think Einstein was big into that one. And it basically said the universe is not getting any bigger. It's not getting any smaller. It just is what it is. It has always been and it will always be. And the Big Bang Theory, of course, says that once upon a time, the universe was an infinitesimally small point, and then it exploded out into the universe.
Yes, and then it suddenly wasn't.
Right. And eventually, like, at this point, sometime apparently after the 1970s, basically, we have pretty much proven, insofar as any scientific theory can be proven, that the universe was, at some point, it all started from the same point. Because we can now see signs that the universe is expanding, in the way, all the stars are moving away from everything else. The universe is getting bigger. And we can also see the background radiation at the very distant edges of the universe that is basically the remnants of the fire of creation. And really just like one of those wild, mind-blowing, interesting fun facts. If you turn on a radio, I used to say a TV because, when they were antenna. Right. But if you turn on a radio...
Because people had real TVs.
Right, exactly. If you turn on your car radio and you're between stations and you're getting static, a portion of that static is actually coming from the cosmic background radiation that was left over from the explosion that created the universe. And I just find that really wild to think about, you know?
Do people still know that during a thunderstorm they can off tune on the AM band and listen to the lightning strikes? Do people still know that?
I don't know. Do people even know what AM is?
Oh, true.
Like, does anybody listen to AM anymore?
Well, first we have to start with the premise. Does anybody actually listen to the actual radio?
Yeah, I guess.
Then we have to decide if they're listening to anything that isn't on FM.
Right. Well, first of all, are they even listening to anything that's not satellite radio at this point?
There's a lot of assumptions between here and there. But trust me, folks, next time you're in a thunderstorm, find yourself an AM radio or an AM receiver or whatever, and off-tune it from any channel, so it's just static in the background. You can listen to the lightning strikes. There'll be little pops and whatnot. I imagine there's a certain section of our listener base that knows this because they are of our age group.
Or there's also a certain section of our listener base, I have to imagine, that is into like neat science and will now be running around trying to find an AM radio the next time there's a thunderstorm in the area just for that.
Yeah. This is kind of the neat thing about the old sci-fi books and whatnot, the old sci-fi stories, is that sometimes at the time they were written, they made sense and were accurate for the information that was known at that time. And so they weren't really in one of the many subgenres of sci-fi that I will name here in a moment. But that as time and new knowledge has gone on, those books have become increasingly inaccurate.
Well, we are of course talking about hard science fiction here. Like
and Rendezvous with
where the writer actually takes some time to do their homework and knows a thing or two about what they're writing. And
Rendezvous with Rama is on the edge of hard sci-fi.
Yeah, fair enough. There's bits of it here and there. Arthur C. Clarke knew what he was talking about. He really did.
But what happens is, as we get new knowledge and discover new things and whatnot, those old sci-fi books that were once written in what could be considered to be an accurate or semi-accurate physical model of our universe suddenly enter into a genre which is like alternate history sci-fi. And the model that they used is no longer accurate, but if you subscribe to a multiverse theory of things, they might be true in another universe.
Good. I'm glad you said alternate history, because I was terrified you were going to say science fantasy. And then I was going to be like, oh yeah, if you go back, Star Wars was basically accurate to scientific understanding back in the day.
No, it was not. But they do sort of jump that gap without any intention originally of having them jump that gap and become alternate history sort of books.
I actually love, one of my favorite writers for a while was Michael Crichton. I couldn't remember his first name. Jurassic Park. Which
John Crichton is the guy on the Farscape.
Yes, which was also accurate for the time.
Sure.
Actually, there was a great bit in Farscape, which was basically like a middle finger to the science fiction, science fantasy argument. Because it was one of the late episodes where he manages to get back to Earth, and they're checking out because he had flown there in like a little space shuttle module, like that had been built in the 90s or whatever, and he got sucked into the other side of the galaxy into a sci-fi universe, and gradually, because he was actually a scientist, he was modifying his module with alien technology so that he could survive and and fly it around and stuff. So he gets it back to Earth, and they're looking at the technology on his module, and his former co-pilot and partner and scientist friend is looking at it like, none of this works, none of this makes sense. All of it looks like it breaks the laws of science. And he looks, John Crichton, he sort of gives this little shrug, and he's like, yeah, I know, but we break the laws of science every time we go out for groceries now, so... It was just one of those great moments. Michael Crichton was very big into doing his research. And I mean, he would break stuff at times, and as time went on, he became more and more, more and more fantastic in his writing. Like I think of Jurassic Park as kind of the turning point where you could still look at it and say, well, it was really grounded in the science of the time, more or less, with some really broad assumptions. And then after that, when he got into like Prey with the clouds of nano robots, and his little Grey Goose scenario or whatever it was, that it was starting to just get silly. But some of my favorite books by him were the older stuff. Like Andromeda Strain. with the team of scientists trying to contain a space bacteria, and Sphere, where they find a crashed spacecraft in the bottom of the ocean that is apparently both centuries old and from the future. And those were fantastic books. I loved them. No, they did make Sphere into a movie with, was it Dustin Hoffman? Or Gene Hackman? Who was in the Sphere movie? It was bad. 1998, now I'm looking at it. Yeah, it was Dustin Hoffman and Sharon Stone and Samuel Jackson.
Okay.
What a badly done movie.
I've never seen it.
What?
I've never bothered to see it.
Don't see it. but the book was fantastic. It got
As so often
12% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Great.
Yeah, so you know it was good. But there was actually back in the 70s, I think, an Andromeda Strain movie that was really well done for the time, based on a book that was really good for the time.
Speaking of movies, I was watching a very important film this morning.
A very important film?
A very important film.
Culturally significant, or...
Oh, yes, indeed. Culturally significant.
Okay, sort of like change the face of cinema, change the world, change the way we see history, you know.
Sure. It might do those things.
And what, pray tell, was this film?
Attack of the Monsters from 1969.
I don't know that one.
Well, it's a Gamera film.
Oh, okay.
You know, Gamera, the big flying space turtle thing.
Right.
Notice the words flying space turtle.
Right.
Okay? Indicating that Gamera's origin is in space.
Okay.
Throughout this film, a number of scientists insist that there is no life in space, in spite of having the giant space turtle, Gamera, in their knowledge base.
Well, it could have been a rocket-powered flying turtle that just vacationed. Maybe it's migratory. You know, like African swallows or European swallows.
Sure, go with that.
It goes south for the winter to Mercury.
During the course of this film, and let me tell you, it is... The reason a lot of people may not have heard of it is because, Attack of the Monsters is the American name.
Okay. And clearly the localization team went all out for what they could call that.
Well, the original Japanese title is something like Gamera versus Gairen or something like that.
Why couldn't...
So
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
I don't know. But the thing is, there's this, we were talking about the science thing a little bit, and this just happens to remind me. Throughout the course of this movie, we learn that not only are there giant space turtles,
Right.
we learn that there is a planet diametrically opposed to us on the other side of the sun. So it is exactly opposite us.
Right.
Which is why we don't really know about it. We know that it has a full breathable atmosphere and is extremely Earth-like.
Okay.
We know that it is inhabited by a couple of Japanese looking, and then clearly, how could they be Japanese? They're on a different planet.
Right, there's no Japan.
Looking, alien women who apparently survive by eating the brains of children. Okay.
Children from that planet, or do they come to Earth to get their children?
Well, they seem to have run out.
Oh. Well, wait, if they're women, can they not make more?
They also appear to be the only people left on this planet.
So there was a couple of brain-eating women and an entire population of children on this planet.
Sure, you can assume that. I don't know anymore. I'm just trying to relate the facts as stated in the film.
Okay, got it.
Anyway, these children, a UFO comes to Earth. These children get in it because, curious children, that's what they do. They get flown by remote control back to the planet, by the way, whose name is Terra. What a surprise. And are landed there by remote control, immediately witness a battle between a couple of giant monsters on the planet's surface, and then are taken into the surrounding buildings, where they are initially tricked into a false sense of confidence and security before the sudden evil brain-eating plan comes out. Meanwhile, Gamera is chasing these children through space because he encounters them just outside of Earth's orbit in the UFO, and things happen, but nothing really happens. But Gamera is taking an interest, we'll say.
Okay.
And so he flies, eventually. Turns out the spaceship is much faster than Gamera is. Think about that. A giant space turtle, and the spaceship is much faster than he is.
Well, that makes sense. Turtles are not known for their speed, space turtles or otherwise.
This is true. That's what I'm saying. See? This is all science and fact-based.
Right. This was accurate for the time.
That's right. This is accurate info for the time. And I don't think I'm really giving away any spoilers here by saying there are a couple of big monster fights, which Gamera eventually wins, and then flies the children in a spaceship he himself repairs back to Earth to be reunited with their families, who have taken an entire movie to become actually concerned that their children aren't around.
That, as far as I've been led to understand by various Japanese animation shows and things, that is pretty standard, where the parents just do not care where the children are. I mean, this is the culture that gave us an entire series based around a child at 10 years old leaving home to basically engage in supernatural monster fights across the planet, while the mother is like, yeah, no, go, do whatever. Don't worry about school.
Right.
Just go capture these giant fire-breathing monsters.
Yep. Can't complain.
I'll stay home with Professor Oak for reasons. Wink, wink.
Yes. You kids go out and play now. Professor Oak is here for his lesson. Anyway,
Gamera rescues the children, though?
Yes. Gamera is a friend to all children. How do you not know this basic fact about Gamera?
Then where was he when all the children on planet Terra were being eaten?
Aha! I don't know. because it's never been made exactly clear if there were any actual children on this Terra planet. I don't know. We only ever see any sign of life in these two women who are wandering around pretty much an entire sort of space complex on Terra. Anyway, so the movie, that's the general course of the movie, right? And it just kind of bumbles along. There's not much, we're basically just tying together monster fights.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the cover art.
Yes.
And there appears to be a giant monster that is a sword. Or has a sword for a face.
That is, you're correct. Mm-hmm. I can't argue. That is definitely what is going on there.
Yeah, actually looking at the Japanese cover art here, which is fantastic. I love, so you have the three children, and they are looking up worshipfully at Gamera, who is breathing fire, and you can see the two space women, and they are clearly space women because they have, all of their outfit has like puffy rings around all the joints, and their helmets have two antennae. Yep. And then there is the giant monster with the blade for a face, and what is clearly obviously a UFO going. And then there is a very surprised looking police officer just stuck down there in the lower left corner. He's just,
he's
I wandered into the wrong cover art.
He's well, what can I tell you?
So now the monster with a blade for a face, I presume, is allied with the two space women.
Yes, okay. Yeah, you have that correct. Yes, that is entirely what is going on. They control him remotely.
Oh, and hence the antennae.
I mean, see, the thing is, this planet supposedly has learned such advanced technologies that it now controls the entire environment basically on this planet.
Okay.
All right. And they've got control of this Gyron thing. Okay.
Who is apparently an original inhabitant of the planet?
Well, no. See, this is what I'm getting to. What I'm getting to is apparently, and this is just a single line in this entire movie, apparently, somehow, the bacteria on this planet learned how to rapidly evolve into giant monsters.
Oh, okay. So it's basically sort of a sequel to Andromeda Strain.
Yeah,
okay.
Essentially. It's quite the thing.
Sounds like quite a film.
It is quite a film. Anyway, I told you all of that stuff.
Oh, God,
okay?
I told you that story to tell you this story.
to tell you about this bit. Now, we can guess what kind of movie this is and how deep the plot is and what's going on in it and that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Excuse for giant rubber monsters to fight.
Yes, excuse for giant rubber monsters to fight is entirely
in a shoestring thin instead of a Tokyo, I assume.
Yes. Shoestring thin premise and plot.
Right.
Fine. I have no problem with that. I watch giant monster movies to see giant monsters fight.
Right. Exactly. Okay? Which is something Pacific Rim should have remembered when it tried to inject like character and plot and arcs.
Right. So, this entire hour and 22-minute film happens in front of you, where nothing of any significance is really going on. There's no particular points being made or anything like that. Right. One of the kids in the film, somewhere near the start of it, has a telescope, and his professed purpose for owning a telescope is that he's looking for different planets. Oh. Somewhere out there in space, where scientists have assured everyone there is no possibility of other life.
Okay.
And the reason he's looking for these planets is because he's hoping to find a place where there's no war, no accidents, and everybody lives in peace. That's it. It's one line. It's thrown away early in the movie, never to be seen again.
Which, if we were having a more serious discussion about this.
Yeah.
But I just can't bring myself to bring it into the whole all of these giant monster movies basically growing out of the post World War II culture of Japan after being devastated by nuclear weapons. Right.
Don't mention that because we don't want to get into it.
Okay.
This entire hour and 22-minute movie goes by, monster fights here and there, blah blah blah, no plot, etc. Except at 1 hour and 20 minutes of this hour and 22-minute movie.
Okay.
This little boy turns to camera to deliver a line more or less like this. I learned we shouldn't be seeking peace on other planets. I learned that we have to work here to get rid of accidents and to end war and to live in peace. We shouldn't seek elsewhere for hope.
Well, that's good.
It's delivered straight to camera. Yeah. Let's make the Earth a great place to live without war and traffic accidents. There's no particular reason for his interest in traffic accidents. He mentions it, I think, 2 other times in the film. Except that we never see his father, so the logical conclusion is...
Oh.
His father must have died in a traffic accident, but we're never told that and never shown that.
Or, well, I mean, basically when you get down to it, it's basically broken window policing, right? The whole traffic accident
thing. Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Gamera versus Gyron. 1969.
I love when things, try to insert those moral lessons into things.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be broadly applicable elsewhere. One of my favorites, and I hesitate to even mention this because I don't know if I want to admit this publicly, but I was a huge fan of the Sabrina the Teenaged Witch sitcom. The actual live action one, not the terrible cartoon.
Right.
Right? And
yes, with the cat.
Yeah, with the cat, with Salem. I was a very big fan of it. And, considering when it was on TV, you can do some math and figure out that I was a little old to be a fan of this show, but I'm not embarrassed about it. But one of the things I loved was that everything was always presented as like this vaguely moral lesson. But the vaguely moral lesson was always about Sabrina not using her magical powers in the wrong way. Like one episode had a very, very, very clear Aesop about not using your magical powers to subvert trademarks and copyright rules. Not copyright, but there was this whole subplot about how she could create candy and snacks and stuff, but she couldn't create brand names. Right? And there were actually some really good jokes there, because that show was great for its like sight gags and puns. That was a punner's paradise. And so she would always conjure up all these snacks that were like Schmickers and N&Ns, and at one point, her boyfriend asks for something and she hands him a bottle of, Yoo-Hoo, the chocolate drink? Well, she can't create Yoo-Hoo, but she creates a bottle of something that is clearly labeled, "Hey, you over there." Anyway, so we all learned an important lesson there about not using our magic to create brand name products, and subverting trademark rule.
Well, I've been pretty good about that so far, so I feel that was an effective lesson.
I have my days.
Where did you get your Starfinder book from?
Well, actually, it's called Schmorfinder, but...
Oh, Schmarfinder, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, it's a D19 system. Yeah. You know what was pointed out to me today, which I find amusing?
What's that?
Regarding our ambassadors. Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can find the actual thing here. This was over in my Discord server.
The actual thing. Okay.
Right. So Ambassador Zariah, or however that's meant to be pronounced, said, if everybody who writes into DI&D is an ambassador, does that make all the listeners who don't write in citizens? Which seems like a logical train of thought, right. Yes? He continues, or she continues, I don't know. If it is true, then you become a person who interacts with foreign powers via interacting with the hosts. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the hosts are a foreign power. So what nation are we citizens of? I then followed up with, what do you suppose the answer is? And Zariah says, the literal answer is less useful than the concern that you two are kings of a different nation.
Well, actually, there's, someday when we get around to the T-shirts and merchandise thing, that's good, because we can sell T-shirts to our fans that are like citizen of Digressionia. We'll have to workshop that, Yeah. But so listeners are now officially called citizens.
Digression?
No, I really don't want to be like a breakaway Soviet republic here.
Oh, okay. You want to be a little more upscale, huh? Alrighty, that's fine.
But see, I'm still very
Digressandia.
Yeah, no, that could work. Anyway, well, hey, excellent. Future feedback, write in and tell us what the name of our country should be. and obviously, actually, it's funny because you and I are obviously co-rulers then. And I discovered I never knew that Sparta for a time was ruled by two kings who shared authority, and recently turned that up in research.
Yeah, it seems like that's a thing I heard recently, too.
Oh, okay, then I remember now where the research was done for.
Yes. very
I
recently.
research a lot of stuff, okay?
Yeah. Although for people listening, that will have been 2 weeks ago, a week ago that we were talking about a thing that will come out in 4 days. Boy, this time thing, I'm telling you.
But whatever we're saying now, at least we know it's accurate for the time.
Yeah.
But I'm actually still rather upset about the whole ambassador thing.
In fact, okay, hang on just a second. But in fact, if something we say now turns out not to be true or have happened by the time the episode comes out, this is now an alternate history podcast.
Excellent, which means next week's episode might get very interesting.
All right. So you were saying you were still upset about the ambassador thing.
Yeah, because if you recall, going back to episode 1, I think, or episode 2.
Right.
No, it must have been episode 4. It was after we recorded the initial flurry.
Right.
I made the ambassador joke specifically as a reference to Nintendo's ridiculous DS ambassador thing for people who had started listening to the show before we released it officially. Those people are supposed to be the ambassadors. Right? That was a reward for them hunting it down. But we didn't actually vet people. We just started calling everybody ambassadors. Right. You know, I'm still very upset about that. I feel that the actual ambassadors got cheated here. This is going to weigh on me forever.
I mean, I want to keep in mind that you used the word ridiculous when discussing the Nintendo ambassador thing. So therefore, I kind of feel like we're in the spirit of it.
Okay, fair enough. Look, I'm not going to make a point of it or anything. I'm just going back to reformatting the feedback in the show notes.
Okay. Ambassador G-Man. Don't know if he's an actual G-Man or it's just, it's short for George Mann or
Gregor Mann.
Anyway,
right? Wasn't he
Gregor
an author?
Mann? Yeah.
Gregor Mann?
Gregor Mann? No. I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, he wrote in via, or she, I don't know. He wrote in via email. That's digressionsindragons@gmail.com.
Oh, I'm thinking of Paul Thomas Mann. German author.
Okay.
Fine. Nobel Prize laureate, fled Nazi Germany. Sorry. Anyway,
okay. Can I carry on now? Are you done?
Probably no relation to this ambassador.
Yeah, probably not. He said, going back a bit to episode 14, where you answered the question of whether or not a gaming group needs a system. I think you overlooked the idea that after a while the system should fade into the background. It doesn't always go away, but everyone should be familiar with how it works, and they just use it without thinking about it. And then, in episode 15, you had a question of why play D&D. I think other than just being a handy default, it does a good job of getting people past the system to the game. It's rich enough to be interesting for more than a couple of sessions, but is streamlined and straightforward enough to let people get a good handle on it quickly. Your thoughts, sir?
Meh, I disagree.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I think the thing is that the system is a tool for the GM. When the player says, I do this or I do that, most of the rules and the mechanics of the game, and I think I've written an article about the 3 reasons why you have rules in the game, and most of them are not player focused. Okay, they're basically for the GM to use the system to resolve actions. So the players don't need to have too firm an understanding of the system. And the more the players have to understand about the system, the less it will ever fade into the background. And from that perspective, I would say D&D, because it has a large number of structural rules, like things like turn taking and action economy, there's a lot of mechanics on the character sheet that it is the player's job to police. There's a lot of arbitrary resources that players have to keep track of, like spell slots and things. Because of that, the system can't completely move out of the player sphere and only be a tool for the GM to use. And therefore, I wouldn't say that it's really good at getting people past the system. That said, I'm not saying that that's a negative part of D&D at all. I still, as the previous disclaimer, I like D&D. It is a fun game. I've been playing it for almost 30 years? 30 years, 4 days from 2 weeks ago.
Don't ask me. I don't know. 30 years, 4 days from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Got it.
30 years in 4 days. Yeah, because I'm going to be 40. And yeah, so I've been playing for 30 years. I started when I was 10. So I've been playing D&D for 30 years, and I'm fine with it. I like it. But no, I would not argue that it fades into the background. I think it is a system that remains pretty front and center when you compare it to other things. And secondly, I would not say that the system's job is to even really fade into the background so much as to only engage the players when necessary and primarily to remain in the GM sphere.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't think D&D fades out at all.
Okay.
But I do agree that the goal of some systems should be that the actual rules fade into the background with experience, because you've performed them often enough you don't actually have to think about them or look them up.
Well, yeah, that's sort of like a mental muscle memory. Kind of like at a certain point you don't have to think consciously about how to drive a car. And then at a certain point you can sleep while driving and your car will still get you where you're going.
Right, exactly. Everybody practice that. No, wait.
Don't sleep while driving.
Do not abandon your car and do not sleep while driving. Those are our two big car rules for you. I'm with you though. D&D is not something that people get a good handle on quickly. Not even close. I still have to look things up.
The problem is, like, the actual action resolution in D&D is simple enough. There's a very simple basic rule.
Yeah.
Roll an ability check, or roll a d20, add an ability modifier, add a proficiency bonus or skill ranks or whatever for whatever edition you happen to be playing. And that's the way it's been since 3rd edition. And that's fine and dandy. There's a lot of specific rules minutia, like the mechanics for specific spells, and traits for specific weapons, and class abilities, and things like that that aren't remotely universal. There's no just one generic attack spell that you can just keep in your head and know how all the spells are going to work and just like replace it. Like, okay, I have an attack spell that does, I roll a d20, roll damage, and then it does fire damage. And the only thing you have to do is change the descriptor. It's like the cold cantrip also slows, and the lightning cantrip, I don't know what I don't know. But the point is, all of those little rules minutia is stuff you either have to remember or reference. And because there's a lot of it, and it's all very character specific, it's stuff that the players, not the GM, have to reference. If there were only 5 spells in the entire game, and I'm not saying that 5 spells would be good for the game, but I'm just saying, if there were only 5 spells in the entire game, the players would not need to know all of the specific rules for their spells, because the GM could remember them all or have a handy cheat sheet of the 5 spells. The players would just have to have a general sense of, this is my spell that throws fire at one target. The specific rules and the interactions between that spell and other spells and all the weird little corner cases, they don't need to be looked up until they're important, but everybody can keep a general idea of that spell in mind, I mean, how many different spells are there in D&D that literally just throw fire at some number of targets? A bunch. Right? How many different healing spells? Right?
Also a bunch. And different degrees of healing spells.
And then you have the healing abilities that are not spells. Like lay on hands. Why don't paladins just get a spell? Why can't they just have the cure wound spell? It's the same effect, but anyway. Yeah. So no, I don't think, for that reason, I think D&D remains mechanically in people's minds and keeps reminding you, yep, you're playing a game.
Ambassador Leland wrote in on the website, just along with a couple other people, just to confirm that at least I can definitely be considered a war gamer.
Why you and not me?
Well, because Ambassador Leland has played all the same games I have.
Okay.
I don't know, because he referenced Harpoon and Airstrike and Air Superiority and Starfleet Battle.
Wait, he mentioned Starship Troopers. I'm reading his comment right now. He mentioned Starship Troopers.
Okay,
I'm a
you're right.
wargamer too.
You're right. Starship. Okay, all right. Then you can be a wargamer too. Join the club.
Also, he mentions the Grognard would make a good word of the week.
You're writing that down, aren't you?
Can you hear the whiteboard going?
I can.
The squeakiness.
So thank you for confirming all that, Ambassador Leland and others. Ambassador Bill, a frequent contributor via our website, wrote in to clarify some difficulty we had with a certain game.
That was the BattleTech, Robotech, FASA versus Palladium problem.
Yes. It's a lengthy post detailing quite the amusing little history.
Didn't it? Because I think after we had this conversation, however long ago this was, I actually looked up which one was which. And didn't it turn out to all be like a licensing issue? Like one company licensed the art and another company got the license for all the names, and then two different games grew out of the same thing. And it was all based...
Yes, which he explains...
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which he explains very thoroughly.
Great. I'll have to definitely check that out.
Basically, FASA did BattleTech, Palladium did Robotech, and we're forgiven for confusing things. Because it is a confusing mess, as it turns out. But he also wrote in to ask a few questions.
A few questions?
He wants... Well, let's put it this way. It's a single question, but has multiple conjunctions to it. What kind of gaming accoutrements do you gentlemen use when you're running a game in person? And then he goes on to ask minis for the PCs and monsters, cardstock substitutes for minor players, dry erase board with inch square grid, Dwarven Forge dungeon models, background, thematic, music, and situations appropriate sound effects. No, I don't.
So none of that, huh?
Pretty much none of that.
You don't even use like a map?
I don't tend to. When I'm running in person... Well, if it's a beginner box, I'll use all the stuff included in the beginner box like I did at Gen Con. But most of the rest of it is pretty much just, you better get a grip on it in your head, and I'd better describe it well enough that you can.
For a long time, I was doing things the same way that I had done it since high school. I had one of the ChessX vinyl battle mats, which is basically just a big, flexible, flat piece of vinyl with a grid on it, and you can draw on it with... we used to call them overhead projector pens. Back when, in school, the only way to show students something was an overhead projector. Now, apparently, they're called wet erase markers.
Wet erase or dry erase?
Dry erase will stain the battle mat. Right.
Yes,
these are the vis-a-vis. So, then it's...
Those will stain too if you don't wipe them off as soon as you're done.
Yes, as I have learned. And also the colored ones will stain those battle mats.
Red is particularly bad.
So anyway, I have used the ChessX battle mat for ages. I used it in 2nd edition, in basic, in 3rd edition, 4th edition. And I love that. And for the longest time, I would just cut up little like colored index cards into 1-inch square tiles and write words on them. Like I would write characters' names, or I would just use like numbers for the monsters.
Oh, I see. Like chits.
I just used chits, and that marked people's positions. Okay. And that was it for years and years and years and years. And then when 4th edition started to come out, and I got really, really excited about 4th edition, I also got a really, really, really big tax refund that year for various reasons.
Because you're an accountant.
I don't want to talk about the various reasons. Don't worry about it. And I was really excited. I wanted to start doing miniatures. And around about this time, D&D's the pre-painted miniatures line and the random booster packs, like they had just hit the Deserts of Desolation set, and they had released the D&D miniatures skirmish game, which was actually just a set of rules for the miniatures. This is before they briefly flirted with doing the box sets, and that was a different thing. So anyway, I started buying up all of the D&D and some of the Pathfinder miniatures that I could once Pathfinder started doing theirs. I now have a hugely extensive collection of pre-painted plastic miniatures of literally everything you could imagine, because my problem was, because of the way I'm obsessive about it, is I was not going to use miniatures unless I could use my miniatures accurately. Like, I did not want to be one of those people who get, okay, now remember, the goblins are the ogres, and the trolls are the orcs, and the spider is a wolf, you know?
You realize that only madness lies that way.
Yeah, it does. It drives people crazy. At that point, just cut out little punch tiles and do it the way I was doing. But I decided I needed an extensive miniature collection.
It's funny how you went from writing a name on a chit is sufficient to no, it must be accurate.
Well, writing a name on a chit is accurate. Okay, there is no
I'll grant you that.
When you write Goblin Skirmisher on that chip, there is no confusion at all as to what that chip represents, and nobody is going to misimagine it as something else. It's when you start using a spider as a goblin that people are going to forget what's what. And then you're going to spend half the battle reminding people this is the goblin and this is the spider and whatever. Because after all, the whole point of battle mat and miniatures, or battle mat and tokens, is just, it's just for positional and tracking convenience. That's all. So anything will do. And honestly, they make, if you really want to go the cheap route, one of the other tools that I got was they make these little circle punches, right? It'll punch out a circle of cardstock they come in 1-inch size, 2-inch size, whatever. And I got a couple of those circle punches. I think, like, if you go into a craft store like Michael's or whatever, you can always find them over by the scrapbooking stuff. And that's what I was using for a while. And then and
they come in like different shapes too, like stars.
Yeah, but I just used circles because they worked. And for the miniatures, I actually would use silver, what do you call it, Sharpie markers to write a number on the base. So if there were 12 goblins, I could differentiate which was which if I was tracking things like hit points.
Right. So you were being way more thorough than I was.
Yeah, but you know what? I liked it. This is the thing, is you don't have to do that. I will argue that if you're playing D&D and you're trying to get by without using anything, I'm not going to say you're doing it wrong or you're wasting the game, but I kind of find that a little silly. At that point, go play something else, because so much of D&D is based on tactical positioning. And anybody who says D&D is gridless, by the way, is a filthy liar.
Well, D&D itself says.
D&D lies. D&D, everything in that game snaps to a 5-foot square grid. All of the ranges are measured out in 5 feet. All of the speeds are measured in 5 feet. Reaches on weapons are measured in 5 feet. There are rules for you can melee attack something as long as it's within 5 feet of you. The whole game, every rule snaps to a 5-foot grid. Whether you're using a grid on the paper or on the table or not, the game is on a grid.
Yep, I've read that article.
That said, I would also like to point out, I don't break out the battle mat and the miniatures or tokens or anything for every fight. Simple fights, if it's just, like one ogre in an empty room, or where terrain is not important and there's only a small number of creatures, or it's a minor fight, those I do narratively. And I think anybody who's out there who argues like, oh, narrative combat is the only way to do it, it's so much better, or tactical combat is so much better, it's the only way to do it, you're missing the point. You should be able to do both, because, both are fun in their way, and they have different kinds of fun,
Yeah, and it's not as if I've never used maps and minis and all that kind of stuff.
By the way, I wasn't getting after you. I was just speaking generally.
No, I understand. But the thing is, I started on mats and minis. But after enough years of doing it, I developed the ability to not need them. So
I do.
We'll
I
see.
like to design. In my games, I do enjoy complex tactical encounters where there is terrain and there are. I try to always use groups of monsters because that makes the fights more dynamic. And I try to, except at low levels where it's really impossible to do this, but I try to use a variety of different types of monsters so you get little monster teams. So once you start doing stuff like that, then it becomes a little bit more necessary to keep track of everything more accurately, not just for you, but for the players.
I don't think people really realize how differently you and I run.
Right?
I mean, because ostensibly this is one question that means the same, pretty much the same thing for a given group of DMs. But the problem becomes when you have DMs that run in two different styles, you're getting two very different answers, and for very different reasons. I tried using thematic music and sound effects once in one game. I was asked in the middle of the game to turn them off because they were distracting. And I've never gone back to it.
I have had precisely the same experience. I have also sat at tables where GMs have used it, and like there is nothing that breaks a game up like the GM picking up his iPhone, hitting the home button to light up the screen, and then hitting the track skip button to move on to the next track. I don't care how quick you think that little motion is. It's still a speed bump in the game. And that's assuming you have everything queued up and you have built a perfect playlist and you don't actually have to search out a track or whatever. I hate that stuff.
The other really annoying bit is that the music at some point has to end.
Or loop. And both of those are a problem.
Yes, they are both a big problem. There's nothing that quite enhances how much noise something is making as when it suddenly stops making noise. And you realize, oh, this room would be pretty quiet if that weren't going.
Yeah.
You know,
and the looping
kind of
thing, too.
So,
if the music isn't designed to loop, when it suddenly stops and then there's silence, and then the music kicks in again, that's very jarring. Because it's like, oh, it's really quiet in here. Oh, God, the music's back. Oh, how many times have we listened to the same track now? And everybody, at that moment where the music starts again on the loop, everybody starts listening to the music. Just because that your brain is like drawn to it. And it's like, oh, okay. I hate music and sound effects at games. I really do. I think it's terrible.
I have to go back and follow up on one of your questions. Or one of your answers. Did your obsession over having the correct miniature extend as far as making sure the miniatures for the players were detail correct as well? Like if a character was said to be carrying a hammer, was he allowed to have a miniature that had maybe an axe or a sword?
I help the player pick out the miniature so that it is close enough in my brain to not jar me. Do you know what I mean? Like, and there, if you use miniatures from my collection, you don't get to bring your own miniature. Sorry. Well, I cannot have one unpainted metal miniature on the table with all of the same painted plastic miniatures of the same style. Okay? This was, and honestly, to defend myself here. Okay? At the time, I was running for a group of people that I had been running games for 8 years. And would, or 9 years, and would run games for another 5 years for. And I sat there, because they wanted to start using miniatures. And I sat down and said, I would love to start using miniatures. I have a bunch of money, and I would drop it into building, like, the best miniature collection ever. And I would buy singles and order bulks of kobolds and goblins and everything I need. Said I would do all this, but because of my own suspension of disbelief, you have to buy into my rules for this. Otherwise, we just stick with the tokens. And the players were, like, fine with that. Okay, so I'm not like a miniature tyrant where people sit down and no. But if we're going to use miniatures at the game, they can't distract me. Okay, because I have to keep track. I can, in real life, keep a combat flowing like nobody's business. All right? I keep combat running really smooth and really fast. Even in 4th... I'm the only one who didn't say 4th edition combat was too slow. I'm like, what? Why? You know, but part of that is because I'm juggling so many things in my head, and I can look at the entire scene at a glance and know which creature is damaged, and remember the armor classes on those 3 creatures, and which creatures have which tactical options, and who's who, and all of that stuff. So, you know, so those were my rules for keeping miniatures. But yes, if we're going to use miniatures at the table, I have a very extensive collection of PC miniatures also, and they're all organized into drawers by race and apparent class. I even have drawers organized by NPC class, like thugs and soldiers and cultists, for when I'm picking out miniatures for an adventure. But yeah, you do have to conform.
Because I've depending on the game and who's running it and how I feel about the game, I have changed the loadouts on my characters to match the miniature that's available.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
I think
it's not always optimal.
No, but I think once again that you have changed the loadout on your character to match the miniature, so you haven't like reconstructed a miniature.
No,
so I was going to say that could be more claim of your wargaming cred. Is re-equipping a miniature.
Basically I've reconstructed the character rather than the miniature. Because there are basically 2 things regarding miniatures that I cannot do well. One is assemble them, and the other is paint them. My hands and eyes just cannot accommodate the painting anymore.
I have learned over the last year that I like painting miniatures. I started doing it in this past year. I'm not great at it yet, but I'm getting better. I just don't have the time. It takes me a lot of time to do one miniature. So like painting an army of kobolds, it would be like, I can't run a game this month because the kobolds aren't ready. But I have also, getting back to the changing the loadout thing, I have found miniatures like D&D miniatures, especially from some of the older sets. Because D&D, when they originally did their miniatures, they had basically they had sets with different names, like Deserts of Desolation, or and they were based on, I think it was mostly D&D 3rd edition. And the miniatures handbook rules that they were doing it for. So a lot of miniature, and they would come in boosters. So you would get they had like Blood War, Angel Fire, and they were really cool miniatures. I don't really care for the miniatures. Actually, I should say that the design of the miniatures is getting better again, but it went through a period where it was really crappy for a while.
I have that miniatures handbook, and that's actually a really interesting book. I don't have it to play the miniatures with. I have it for the other stuff in it, the builds. And
I should check it out. I never actually read it.
Classes. Yeah. But also remember, before that, and this was definitely 3.0, or 3.5 maybe, but 3.0 I'm pretty sure. They actually had their chainmail line.
Right.
Which was more tabletop miniature gaming than it was RPG stuff. But all the stuff in there was drawn from the D&D property and mythos and all that kind of stuff.
But one of the things I have done, though, is if I'll find a miniature of a particular thing, I have statted that up as a monster in whatever edition of D&D I was running. To the point where, like, there are a certain number of, like, humanoid builds that I have. Because I like when I have goblins, I don't just like having a stat for goblins. I like having different stats for different types of goblins, like goblin skirmishers and goblin sharpshooters and stuff like that. So based on the miniatures I had in my collection, I have actually created various humanoid builds for monsters based on a lot of my impression of what types of weapons and tactics humanoids use in the Angryverse came from me statting up miniatures. And it's like, oh, I have these goblins that use these cleavers. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool. Ambassador Yan has written in again to the website at digressionsandragons.com. He wants to know, what languages do you speak, or would you like to speak, and or like the sound of? That's his first part of the question. And I think it's pretty safe to say and pretty clear, I can barely speak English. I have a great deal of trouble with languages that are not English. Because I think I've explained this before. While I have a very large reading vocabulary and writing vocabulary, I have not heard a lot of the words I can use said out loud. Okay? And that sometimes becomes very obvious in that other podcast we do, GM Word of the Week, and gets me in a little bit of trouble.
Hey, I have started to lay off you regarding your pronunciation.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Let's not get into it.
I will say that you handled the Greek very well in the recent episode that is 2 weeks ago from 4 days in the future, or 5 days in the future.
Oh, good.
So, well done.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much. I feel so much better.
I know it was weighing on you.
Yes, it was. But frankly, when you get to languages I would like to speak, there's not a lot. But I would like to be able to do ancient Greek and ancient Latin, or whatever we call it, the old Latin.
We just call it Latin.
Okay. Well, because there's New Latin too. There's a difference there somewhere. Maybe it's just on the writing side. Well,
the New Latin is the Latin that was used mainly by the Catholic Church. Isn't that correct? So it was Latin as reimagined during the medieval era.
But those are the two I would like to speak, but I have no reason for that. I just think it would be neat and it would help me pronounce other things. I did take a half a year of French in junior high, so you can only imagine how much that has stuck with me. And only because some foreign language was a requirement, I would not have done so willingly otherwise. And a year of Russian in college. Again, because it's required.
I actually like the sound of Russian, I guess, which is part of the answer to that question.
Yeah, I've only retained a little bit of the Russian. I can puzzle it out if given enough time looking at some written Russian, but that's about it. So that's my story. What's yours?
Let's see. As far as languages I would claim I can speak these days, really none. Once upon, I took three years of Italian in high school, which is some time ago, and 2 years of Spanish in college. And because of the similarities between Italian and Spanish, as far as them being Romance languages, it was I can still particularly reading, I can read simple things in Spanish and Italian still.
Right. You can get by on a menu.
I certainly wouldn't claim to be able to speak them at this point because I haven't really used them in 24 years or so, however long it's been.
Yeah.
I also took 2 years of Latin in junior high school, which, as you can imagine, Latin is one you fall out of practice with quickly. And so I would no longer claim that I could speak Latin, though interestingly enough, between the Latin, the Italian, and the Spanish, if you show me just about anything in Latin, Italian, Spanish, French, or Romanian, assuming it's not too complicated or the conjugations aren't weird, I can still generally understand what's being said. Or Portuguese. That was the other one.
See, Latin wasn't even offered at any of the schools I attended.
I was forced to take it.
Well, because you're up in... For some reason, Latin sticks around.
Yeah, in New York, we have a big Latin American population. Oh, wait. Yeah. No, it was as punishment for being part of the honors program in my middle school.
Yeah.
They made me take Latin. On the belief that it would lend me a very good vocabulary. Right. Which, to be fair, even though English is a Germanic language, and gets much of its structure and syntax from the Germanic languages, Over 60% of our vocabulary is derived from Latin, so I guess. But still, you know, the idea was it was supposed to help me on the SATs. I think that's the whole point, which at that point, it was 6 years before I was going to take the SATs. Yeah, right? 7th grade, 7th and 8th grade, 2 years of it. Just for completeness, I should point out that I also failed to learn Japanese twice in college. The only thing I have retained is the ability to identify things as ham or not ham, or ask if something is a ham. It's like, kore wa hamu desu ka? Kore wa hamu ja arimasen. That's, is that a ham? That is not a ham. And the only reason for that is like the first or second, it was like the first dialogue in the Japanese textbook that we were using, you know, where they're still just trying to set you up with like, it was reflexive pronouns like this, that, these, and those, and a bunch of vocabulary.
Right.
And the situation was there was a guy trying to get through customs. Which, well, it's a really good setup because the customs officer can say things like, what is that? And then the guy can say, that is a thing. You know, that's honey, or, you know, what is this? And yada, yada, yada. And, you know, so it's, you get the questions, you get the reflexive pronouns, and and then you get the, you know, vocabulary. So it was a perfect setup. But then the plot takes a dark turn. Because suddenly the customs officer looks over and he's like, oh, hey, what's that? Is that a ham? And then the guy says, that's not a ham. Well, actually, it's ham. And then the customs officer looks at him and says, ham is not allowed. And so if I ever go to Japan, I can properly navigate customs as long as all I'm trying to get through it is ham or anything that isn't ham. I guess so. That's everything. I can get everything through customs.
Yeah. Okay. My Russian class was not the right Russian class for me to be in. I threw myself in at the deep end. I took a 201 Russian class without having taken a 101.
So that's the point at which the teacher does not speak anything but Russian, I assume.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So I was forced to catch up rather quickly. I think I remember bits of a Solzhenitsyn. A Solzhenitsyn poem. Bits of a poem. It's like "Что ищет она в краю родном." That's what I remember.
I'm picturing you now sitting there on the first day, and the professor looks at you and then, you know, gabbles off something in like rapid fire fluent Russian, and you look at the professor and just like, we must catch moose and squirrel? Yeah, I think we're actually contractually obligated.
Yes, we are contractually obligated.
To mention we have a sponsor in Gamer Concepts, who are located at gamerconcepts.com. You know, after winging it for a couple of weeks, we have been provided with some interesting fun facts about who they are. The founder, Jody Applegate, his nickname is Apple Cart. Obviously, if you're going to buy, you know, your gamer shirts and other gaming accoutrement, you want to go to a place whose founder's nickname is Apple Cart.
Because you don't want to upset the Apple
and
Cart.
He would be upset. Though I'm told that he is also a great guy. Just another fun fact. That's right on their one sheet there. They were at Gen Con for 22 years and Dragon Con for 13 years. They're definitely worth checking out.
And when you go to check out Gamer Concepts at gamerconcepts.com, please tell them we sent you. I have run across a thing over the last couple of weeks that seems to have cropped up around me mentioning Genesis and that I finally got it. And I have received a lot of feedback, both, you know, on our site and on Twitter, about how people are really intrigued by the system, but don't like the dice. But these are people who don't like the dice without actually having tried the dice.
Well, now wait a minute. Is one of those people me?
It could be, but I think you've tried the system before.
Yeah,
the dice
I have
system,
tried it both as Star Wars and Warhammer Fantasy RP. So
yeah, there you go.
So when I say I do not like the dice system, I'm speaking from a position of familiarity.
Right. The chief complaint I seem to get is that they think it takes too long. and that the resolution of the dice system, first determining what's in the pool, then rolling, then canceling things out, and then deciding on the result, and then narrating the result takes too long.
Yes. I'm just agreeing with you that is a common complaint. I am not going to editorialize here, even though that complaint is totally correct and legitimate.
Which it isn't, but that's fine.
But it is.
Basically, I just want to kind of lay out what my experience has been.
Fair.
Here's what happens. First, when you first play a system with these dice, and what they call the narrative system from FFG, what first happens is the dice are very confusing. And you get a bunch of dice hit the table, and you don't know what any of it means right off the bat. And you stare at them, and you try to work, okay, this cancels this, and that cancels this, and this cancels this, and now I don't remember what I'm left with, or what was canceling where, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that happens. Granted, your first few times on the table. And yes, then the GM has to stare at it and go, well, how do I make any sense out of this? And then once he's made sense out of it, he has to go, all right, what does that mean in terms of results in the story? And that's fine. That is a normal and expected part of transitioning into a system like this. But I'm here to tell you, absolutely, that is a very short period of time where it is that kind of a problem. Because after your first game or two using these dice, what happens is you look at the dice are rolled, okay, a number of dice hit the table, and you just start pulling out pairs that cancel each other, all right? And that takes maybe 3 to 5 seconds. And by then, as the GM in this system, you will know what you're left with, and it will immediately make sense to you what to do with those. So, for example, if you're shooting at somebody, okay, we'll just take basic combat. If you're shooting at somebody and you roll the dice, and the dice represent your skills and abilities, right, with that particular weapon, whatever you're doing, plus things like cover and distance and whatnot from your target, all right, and that's the handful of dice you roll. And then you immediately grab things and cancel out. You come up with like 2 advantage and 1 setback, okay? That's the final result. 2 advantage, 1 setback. That means they hit, they do 2 damage, and something happens within the scene that makes it harder for them to hit that target next time. And that's narrated in the scene like, okay, you hit him, and in doing so, you spin him around, and he falls down behind a box where you can't see him. That covers everything that happened in that dice roll. And once you're experienced enough with that, it takes all of like 10 seconds to roll, sort, and narrate. And I promise this is true.
Okay.
And I want to point out that if you really have trouble with this concept, I did a whole series of short podcasts for the Star Wars system showing you how to narrate for each and every skill check you might do in that game, including explaining the philosophy of how to make the narrating easier and a couple of other things. And showing, I think one of the last things I did for it was like a whole scene where a building is on fire, and how to hand out checks, skill checks that deal with that situation to anybody and everybody, no matter what their particular specialization might be. And that is Skill Monkey. You can get it on iTunes. All right. So if you really have trouble with the dice system, I would encourage you to go listen to the Skill Monkey podcasts. Just hit your Google thing, type in the Skill Monkey, and you should be able to find it without too much problems. Now, remember, it's oriented towards Star Wars, but since this is the same dice system, it equally applies to Genesis.
Okay. Now, I am going to interject to say 2 things.
All right.
Okay.
Go
Number
ahead.
1, my personal experience disagrees with yours, for better or for worse, which is fine. Okay.
Sure.
But what I would say is anybody judging this system before having played it at least a few times, not just once, but several times, is wrong, no matter what their opinion is. Because you absolutely cannot judge any game mechanic without actually seeing it in play. It's a mistake to do that. That said, if you look at the dice system and it seems clunky and unintuitive, and there's nothing else drawing you into the game anyway, you don't really have to try
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's like, go play something
No.
else. That's fine too. But
Sure.
But no, I totally understand what you're saying in your defense. My experience has been different with it, but I think people should just give it a try. I don't want to hear people judging something that they haven't tried. I think that's dangerous. That is really a bad way to judge role-playing games critically.
I think there's a lot of, in my experience, there has been, anytime somebody suggests a new dice system, which rolls anything but a standard D20, a lot of people jump up and down and claim that's horrible and no good, and it doesn't even matter what system it is or what game is being played with that system or anything like that. I have to believe that if a game comes out with a different system of dice or uses different dice or whatever, that there is a design reason for that. That either it helps fit the theme of the game to the things you're doing in the game, or that somebody feels it provides a particular advantage that they can't get with any of your, standard basic systems like D20 or whatever.
Okay.
Well, because if I could accomplish the feel of the game I wanted with a D20, then we just roll D20s.
Right, but here's the thing. Game designers aren't always right. And they don't always design good things.
Oh, no.
I mean,
this is true.
What was it? The guy behind Silicon Knights thought Too Human was a good idea. And everything he did for the reason of the themes and the game and the story he wanted to tell and all that, and turned out a steaming pile. So, while I agree with you again, automatically being turned off to a dice mechanic because it's different is a dangerous precedent to set. Also, looking at a dice system and say, well, there's got to be a good reason for that. That's not always true either. The reason may not be good, and there are people who have designed dice systems specifically just to not do D&D. There are dice systems out there that exist specifically because, we didn't want to make D20. Which is also a bad reason to design a system. But
yeah, I don't know that I'd so much push for there's a good reason, just that there is a reason. And that you probably should be interested in finding out what that reason is first.
You know what? It comes down to the doctrine of charity. When you are evaluating a role-playing game, if you want to evaluate it in any sort of reasonable or intellectually honest way, you owe yourself to play it. And ideally, you owe yourself to play it for at least 3 months. If you do not do those things, and I will even give up on the 3 months. If I say 12 weeks is the right time to evaluate a system, but if you have a month, then fine. If you have only a single session, then your judgment is suspect. If you've never run or played the game before, you don't know what you're talking about, no matter what you're saying.
Yeah. Anyway, and admittedly, I am a fan of this dice system. I like the way it works. It works for the way I run games. I'll give you all that. But yeah, I'm with you on the, if you're writing this off without having even tried it, then it's not always the best way to do it. There's a very tiny GM that lives in your house.
That would explain all the dice being left around everywhere.
Yes,
there is a tiny GM who lives in my apartment. Or actually, I should say, there is a tiny GM with whom I share an apartment.
And I'm also further told that tiny GM has done a thing.
What did she do? I can't be held responsible for what she does. She's her own person.
I know.
She misbehaves a lot on social media. So what did she do to who, and how much is it going to cost us?
Well, I don't know that it's cost us anything yet.
That makes a nice
necessarily.
change.
Maybe it has. Maybe it hasn't. I don't know. I'm not on that end of things. It seems like there is a site that has popped up, and as near as I can tell, it's called Harry Potter RPG.
What? Hey, Tiny.
What?
Did you make a website?
Yeah. Sorta.
Okay, I'm told this is accurate.
Okay, all right.
What's it about?
All right.
Gaming.
She says it's about gaming.
Harry Potter.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it says Harry Potter RPG on it. I assume it's about a Harry Potter RPG.
Here, come here a sec. Come here.
There's some words under it, and I think.
Oh, hey, I wrote that.
Can you hear through that?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay. So what's your website?
It's just a blog, really. Like, it's nothing that great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're making an RPG?
I am attempting to, yes, make an RPG that isn't out there right now. Harry Potter setting. I've looked extensively online for a Harry Potter sort of RPG. I've seen a few kind of half-butted attempts, but I want to try and make like a full functioning, working, finished game.
And so this blog is basically
Cool.
going to be your design process.
Yes.
So this is what you were doing on WordPress this morning.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Which is why I was playing the annoying Harry Potter music.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well,
Actually,
cool.
I want to say right here, I am very, very proud of my girlfriend here because of what she's not doing, which is she's not merely creating a bunch of races and classes and trying to cram them into D&D.
Oh.
Which is most people's approach to making a role-playing game. Because I literally didn't, I knew she was thinking about Harry Potter games, and we actually talked a little bit about how you might do it. And I also knew that she was setting up a blog this morning. I did not know this was the project specifically that she was doing, so this is actually news to me. I'm sure she would have told me later, but it's been very distracted, and then I had to record a podcast today.
Right. Well, she told Twitter.
She tells Twitter a lot before she tells me.
That's
usually how I find out I'm in trouble. But I'm also glad that the 4 words that spell like the death of any hack are not on this website anywhere, which is powered by the apocalypse.
Hey now.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
You're fired. You're not allowed to be on my press team.
That's a silly word for what we're doing. Press team?
Oh dear. No, but I hope it goes well for her. And if people would like to follow along, there's a URL which you're going to read.
That's the HPRPG 948681867.wordpress.com. Though we will look into getting she literally just set it up this morning and set the framework up. So we're going to look into setting a better URL for it.
Yeah. There will be a link in the show notes which will take you there to it, which I'm sure will be far more convenient than trying to remember.
HPRPG 948681867.wordpress.com. How hard is that?
I can't even remember my own phone number.
Yeah, why did she use our phone number for that? I'm kidding. That's not our phone number. Don't call that number. I don't know who's there. They're probably muggles and won't know what you're talking about.
Oh, muggles. All right. I don't know. Gosh, it's weird doing these things on a Sunday,
weird doing these things on a Sunday. In the middle of the afternoon like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
I mean, I've usually just had dinner when we start recording, and instead this time I've only just had lunch.
I'm actually looking at the clock and saying when we hang up this call, I will be going to prepare dinner.
Well, then I guess we'd better hang up this call before you run out of time.